Good morning to members of the public. As you're joining us, the wait room has been open, and as soon as I have an indication that everyone has been brought in, we'll start the meeting. Good morning. Good morning, members of the public, members of the department, fellow commissioners, Chief, Mr. Inspector General, to our city attorney. Welcome all. Today is January 12th, 2021. It is 9:31 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Good morning, Commissioner Decker.
Here.
Commissioner Bonner.
Here.
Commissioner Briggs.
Here.
Commissioner Kalanche is absent. Commissioner Sobroff.
Here.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Chief of Police, the Executive Director, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Madam President.
Thank you very much. As we begin this new year, it remains important to reflect on the devastating impact that COVID-19 is having on our community, especially since the last time that we met. The numbers of infections have increased, as we all know, both in the department and throughout the Los Angeles community, and the number of deaths are just absolutely tragic. Sadly, we learned this Saturday that PSR Raymond Guerrero passed away on Saturday due to complications related to COVID-19. Our hearts go to his family. Since we last met, we also learned that former Police Commissioner Rose Ochi also passed away due to complications related to COVID-19. And just this morning, we learned from Commissioner Kalanche that a member of her family has passed away. And of course, that explains her absence from the commission meeting today. There are so many throughout Los Angeles who are suffering, many families suffering the untold pain as a result of the loss of loved ones, many suffering the economic consequences that are the result of our need to socially distance. And as we reflect on these pains and these losses, which are tremendous, we must also reflect on the people in the community who are on the front lines, trying to help all of us through this. This includes many city workers, the men and women in the Los Angeles Police Department, firefighters, paramedics, sanitation workers, clerks, civilian workers throughout this city who are keeping our city functioning. And of course, the many, many people outside the city structure, grocery store workers, delivery drivers, everyone working in the healthcare field, teachers, countless others who are making our communities function during this difficult time. And so as we recover, and hopefully recover quickly, we also have to give our thanks in this new year to all of those people. Our role today is to continue our work as a board of Los Angeles Police Commissioners in conducting our oversight of the LAPD. The agenda was previously posted and published last week. As a reminder to all members of the public who wish to be heard today, public comment will be heard on item number 2 on the agenda, to which we will dedicate a total of 45 minutes. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. And of course, at the request of the speaker, they will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. The members of the public can participate in this meeting in one of a number of ways, and these are all outlined on the agenda. The public can call in to the phone numbers listed where they can listen and not participate. The public can also submit written public comment, which many people have done prior to today's meeting, to the Police Commission address, email address of policecommission@lapd.online. And of course, you can log into this Zoom meeting, as many people have, and raise your virtual hand, and you will be called in order. If you use the phone number to log into this or to call into this Zoom meeting, you can press *9 if you wish to speak on an agenda item. The first matter on our agenda today is a report of the Chief of Police. Chief Moore, I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Okay. Good morning, and commissioners. Thank you so much for opening today's meeting with a tribute and acknowledgement of Ray's sacrifice. He is the 4th employee that we have lost to this terrible pandemic. It is a tragic set of circumstances the man who otherwise is in good health to succumb to this virus. He leaves behind him with 2 young children as a family, and certainly colleagues and friends of communications and all the department. We mourn with his loss. As you've indicated, this vaccine since our last meeting, this pandemic since our last meeting has only accelerated and become more widespread and more lethal. And it's certainly a mirrored application as far as the department goes as well. Our experience over this last 3 weeks has been to see an explosion, if you will, of the pandemic. To give you some perspective of the numbers, we have today 2,229 positive COVID cases. Since our last meeting, which was, I believe, about 3 weeks ago, that's an increase of 964. The increase is primarily in our sworn ranks. About 2/3 of our overall infection rate is with our sworn rank and file. However, our civilians also, as Ray indicated, Ray was a civilian working our dispatch center, but also our custody services. I spoke with a wife of a custody services officer over the weekend who's currently hospitalized. We do have 6 additional employees that are currently hospitalized as they are trying to survive this battle with this virus. Additionally, we have 897 personnel that are at home recuperating from this. This is an increase of about 200 from where we were about 3 weeks ago. We're monitoring our deployment each day to ensure that we have sufficient staffing. We are realigning resources in order to ensure that our 911 dispatch, as well as our patrols, investigative resources are meeting the needs of the moment. But this is absolutely impacting us in our workforce as well as the family members. Our efforts to combat this continue to be our protective measures with face coverings and masks, as well as protective measures with sanitizing and hygiene services for any location that has a positive COVID test. As well as ensuring hand sanitizers and social distancing. Our capacity of our buildings is at 25%. We are continuing to support telecommuting as possible, and certainly our public desks and services has also been compromised as an effort to protect the public as well as our personnel from this pandemic. In the midst of this, I'm encouraged by the vaccination plan that has begun the last 3 weeks. The fire department, as of yesterday, has just over half of their workforce that has received the first shot of the 2-stage vaccination. We're working closely with the fire department to develop a mass vaccination process for the department. We are part of 1B of the rollout, which means that the initial plan was the middle to end of January. Today, it looks like we may be able to begin a mass vaccination of department personnel by that time frame, certainly by the end of January. We're working with the fire department, and they currently use 4 stations on a day watch configuration where their staff comes by and is vaccinated on the first of 2 shots. When they have any unused doses, we are being able to take advantage of that. And I want to thank them as well as county health when they have other pharmacy locations or clinical settings that may have an unused dose, whether it's 1 or 5 doses. They're contacting us, and we're scrambling to get volunteers to go to the location. So while we are not in 1A yet, we're leaning forward, just given the impact this is having on the health and welfare of our people and their families, so that there's to also ensure that none of these doses are lost. Was announced yesterday that the city, working with the county and state health departments, are building a mass vaccination process at Dodger Stadium. It's transferred yesterday from a testing center, which has tested more than 1 million Angelenos over its existence for COVID, is now shifting. So by Friday, no later than Saturday, we'll have a launch of mass vaccination. This is for healthcare workers in Tier 1 at this point. The maximum that will build from 4,000 vaccinations a day to as many as 5,000 to 6,000 at these sites. And these sites are being developed across the state of California as the health departments build to volume needed in order to vaccinate a county of 10 million, a city of 4 million in a 2-stage process. The department will work alongside our fire brothers and sisters to amplify access to all of our personnel. We did take a survey since our last meeting of department rank and file of all members. More than 9,000 members participated in the survey, and I'm happy to report that 60% reported that they would take the vaccine immediately upon its availability. 18% reported that they would, with more information, consider. And then we had about 20%, 2 out of 10, indicated a reluctance or a denial. They did not want to take the vaccine at this point. In the midst of this, we understand that hesitancy. This is a natural consequence of something that has been developed as quickly as it has to ensure that it's safe, that it's reliable, and that it's a risk-benefit that is in the right calculus. I sat on a board a webinar, participated with Dr. Fauci for the International Associations of Chiefs of Police to talk about American policing and how we're seeing this hesitancy that does exist, as we're seeing in the healthcare industry and we're seeing in other parts of our community. And what we're finding is that the more information that we can provide, the education perspective, the more it addresses concerns, and we see a more and more willing public. So I think that for the department, we've formulated a small task force that is working each day, both for to build the vaccination process for the department, as well as in support of LA Fire for eventually all of city employees, and then of course, more largely, this entire region. This will be the next major pull, if you will, or lift for this pandemic, will be the vaccination of our communities and allowing us to move forward and out of an eventuality out of this pandemic. The next point I want to talk about is a series of some significant events that have occurred since we met last. And probably, and without question, the most prominent were the events of last Wednesday in our nation's capital. As an American, as a law enforcement official, I am just, was not beyond disappointed, was disgusted to see the actions of rioters and to see an insurgency, a word I would have thought would never have occurred in this country, in this great democracy. Within that day also was a protest activity here outside of City Hall, attended by primarily pro-Trump or prevent the steal phrasing, if you will, of this demonstration. It was largely lawful, loud, boisterous, and also had a contingent of a counter protest. Unfortunately, during the course of that multi-hour protest, the larger group and smaller counter protests engaged in shouting and yelling at each other, and eventually became into minor skirmishes and altercations. In the midst of that was an attack or an assault on a young woman that has received a fair amount of public information and awareness. This young woman, as she was accosted by other individuals that were in the pro-Trump side, is our information. She sustained minor injuries, but certainly in the process, what she reported to us was that it constituted a hate crime by the nature of a racial epithet that was used during the assault. We began an investigation that has continued over through the weekend. We've identified 3 people of interest, one of which we've identified by name. We'll continue our investigation with him. And yesterday, we produced a crime bulletin or a community bulletin identifying 2 additional images of individuals that we believe are involved in this assault. And we're desirous of the public helping us identify them and conducting and continuing our investigation with what occurred here at the steps of our City Hall. We take this matter very seriously. This crime is not something that is minimized or marginalized because of it being associated with protest activities. There's no place in Los Angeles for hate. This is a location. This is a great part of the country that has discord, it has political discord and remarks. But when it escalates into physical violence, when it escalates into the use of racial epithets and other items of hate, this department will act aggressively to identify and bring to justice those individuals. I also want to identify that during these last few days, we've heard of, and I've learned of accounts of people who believe that the department did not act forcefully enough, that we did not take action immediately upon her being identified as a victim of an assault. We've initiated a complaint investigation, and I will withhold judgment on the actions of our personnel that were there, attempting to maintain order and keep these opposing groups apart and keep them safe until all the information is in. But I do want to signal that the significance of this event is on my radar. I'm watching it closely, and we'll report a follow-up on both items as to the outcome of the hate crime investigation, as well as the matters of our actions that day. Also during that day, we have seen in the aftermath of this insurgency on our nation's capital, we've heard reports of law enforcement in an off-duty basis and military being part of the march, protest, demonstration, and insurgency, or the effort to invade the Capitol and interrupt our national's democratic process. This department is met yesterday with all of our senior staff, and we have instructed that if we learn of anyone who has traveled on this to this event, the president's remarks, or was present in Washington, D.C. during the January 6th, that we are to identify them and identify their involvement and identify what their actions were. Were they lawful? Were they present at a speech or presentation? Or did they find themselves engaged in illegal activity or conduct that is criminal? I've also spoken with Christine Johnson, who's the assistant director in charge of the LA office for the FBI, who's conducting the overall investigation into the criminal actions of individuals that sprang from January 6th. And I've committed to her our full cooperation. Anyone that we identify that has traveled will be ordered and directed to provide an interview with the FBI, as they are interested in witnesses and in identifying people who did commit criminal conduct, but also witnesses that were there that may add information as they pursue those criminal acts that were completed that day, which also included the death of 5 individuals. And certainly we know of the death of the Capital City police officer and his tragic loss. This is a grievous moment in our time and in this great democracy. And in the next few days, as we move towards the inauguration, my commitment is for the safety of Los Angeles by ensuring that we have added deployment of personnel, that we are ensuring the safety of our city facilities. That we are monitoring closely with our state and federal representatives, any information streams, tips, or leads relative to protest activity here in the Los Angeles region. We are aware of threats and tips and leads involving targeting of state capitals on the 17th of January, as well as events on the 20th of January. However, at this point here in Los Angeles, we have no specific information about any such threats or a risk to our critical infrastructure, our elected officials, or others. However, we're monitoring that, as I said, twice a day, and we're keeping our feelers out. And if people, Los Angelinos, learn of something that is suspicious or causes them concern in this regards, I would ask them to see, if they see something, to say something. This is a critical time. I believe this democracy will survive, and I'm absolutely confident that as we work together and we ensure that there's no safe space for those that would wish to interfere with our democratic processes, that as Americans and Angelinos, that we will survive this moment, and that we'll learn from it as the importance of us having discord and having disagreement, but doing so in a manner that is lawful and is consistent with our democratic principles. 2 other issues, and forgive me for my length of my remarks, but 2 other issues I want to talk about. There was over the last few weeks, we have seen a development of some protest activities that are termed anti-mask protesters. And what this is dealing with is protest activities, individuals take exception to the mask requirements by the health department for when you're present in businesses or you're in company of other individuals in a public setting. And we saw the reports of these demonstrations at a few shopping centers, primarily on the west side, in which concerns were whether or not law enforcement, LAPD specifically, if we're acting aggressive enough and assertive enough to ensure that people were paying, that were adherent to those mask requirements. Previously and to this point, our effort is to achieve voluntary compliance from individuals regarding the health requirements of this to stop the spread of this pandemic and its lethal impact on our community. However, I also recognize that our officers would benefit by added guidance and information as to circumstances of expected actions where it would move beyond a voluntary compliance, and we would take enforcement actions to include an arrest. This last weekend, we had such a demonstration on the west side in the West LA area, and I'm happy to report that the added expectations and oversight led by Chief Vito Palazzolo on the west side and his personnel, that when the group was located, that they were offered a mask. They took the mask and continued in a lawful manner in their conduct, and we did not see the actions that we'd seen a week earlier. So this is an effort by the organization to demonstrate that we will work in a proportional way to achieve compliance, to achieve this safety of our community, and that we are responsive as we find areas of our work that can be improved upon. I do want to report on an in-custody death that occurred in the Newton area on December 30th, as I do each week, relative to categorical related instances. Forgive me for a moment. In that instance, it occurred on the 1700 block of East Cesar Chavez Avenue at a hospital facility. There was where the death occurred. This happened from a Newton Division incident, which occurred on the 18th of December, when an individual later identified as Mr. Carlos Sandoval, male Hispanic, 68 years of age, went to Newton Station and turned himself in, reportedly for the murder of his roommate. He was taken into custody with that incident, and after confirming that, in fact, he was wanted for this murder investigation, he was taken to 77th jail, where he was seen at the dispensary for a pre-existing non-COVID related medical condition and cleared for booking. A few days later, on the 22nd, while still at the 77th jail, the individual began exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, and he was transported to this hospital facility, where he was subsequently admitted and continually monitored until the 30th. At that time, the individual's condition continued to deteriorate, and he was placed on a ventilator. On the 30th, Mr. Sandoval passed away, and he was pronounced by doctors in the early evening hours. Force Investigation Division did not respond to the hospital that night due to the highly contagious nature of the Mr. Sandoval's illness. However, they have assumed the investigative responsibility and will, in a chronological fashion, reconstruct the events from his initial contact with the police department all the way through his custody and his monitoring at the hospital location. Again, we clarified there was insurance clear. There was no use of force related to this event. This is in custody death that, pursuant to commission protocols, will be investigated by force investigation. The results of that, in concert with oversight by the Inspector General's office, will be brought back before this board for evaluation. Lastly, I do each week, I talk about crime information, and I'm going to avoid talking about percentage of increase or decrease at this point because it's very early. This is the first 9 days of the year, so the numbers are small. But what is important for me to remark on is that the violence that we saw, shooting violence specifically in the month of December, has unfortunately continued into the initial week and a half of January, to include a death of a 16-year-old young man in the Pacoima area of San Fernando last night, and the death of 3 men in South Los Angeles within 6 hours of themselves on Sunday. Beginning the year, in the first 12 days of this year, we have had 19 homicides. That number was 9 last year. Shooting violence has continued at a velocity that gives me a great deal of concern. Of the 19 homicides, 12 we know of right now, we believe, are involved in gangs, gang-related in one fashion or another. Last night, I held a conference call with our gang interventionist specialists, primarily from South Los Angeles, but also from the Hollenbeck area, and to understand their perspective and garner information as to how they see our relationship and what strategies that we can bring to bear to try to stem this violence. They made some suggestions that I find worthwhile, which to include increasing the training between interventionists, who they're adding additional staffing with support from Mayor Garcetti's office, but also ensuring that those new interventionists and ambassadors are known to our officers and vice versa, so that we can understand our respective roles and help coordinate in this effort to impact this violence. Additionally, as they identified that there are a number of individuals that are on high-risk probation, and because of COVID and probation officers and other supervision activities that normally would occur are not occurring. They're asking for our help here. They believe that those individuals are high risk and are involved in furthering some of this violence, and they're asking for law enforcement to help step into that space and provide that added supervision. So we'll work with them to understand how we can better do that, and ensure also where we work with probation and parole, that while this COVID-19 pandemic is critical that we manage our jail populations, it's also critical that those offenders that are violently preying upon communities across Los Angeles are pulled from those communities, because we believe in part seeing an increase in this violence because of their continued presence in the community. So the last issue is that we've seen that as well as we've been impacted by COVID and our workforce, so has our interventionists. And one of the areas that we're going to work on is an effort to try to get them better access and quicker access to testing. I heard story after story yesterday of them having to wait hours and hours and sometimes days in order to get COVID test results back. And that's impacting their ability to be in the field, to work with a community that's at risk. And so we'll work closely with them as essential workers to open that pipeline, ensure that they have more ready to access. Finally, in regards to officer-involved shootings, we have had 0 officer-involved shootings this year. That number was 1 last year at this time. I know, and we will provide a year-end press conference on the 25th of January. This will be a Zoom or a remote press conference that will talk about both crime as well as our officer-involved shooting numbers. But just in summary, for 2020, we finished with 27 officer-involved shootings, 7 of which were fatal. In 2019, that number was 12, and our 4-year average on fatal officer-involved shootings was 15. Lastly, in regards to staffing, those numbers are posted online. We remain at a hiring freeze and promotional freeze, which means that we are, as people are retiring and are leaving the organization, which is typical of any department of our size, our workforce is being reduced. This is pursuant to actions taken by the council, and we are at 9,832 officers, sworn members of the organization, and 2,936. Those numbers by March or April on a current trajectory will be approximately 100 fewer officers than we have today, and about 100 fewer civilian members. We are also lastly providing information to the council per their direction regarding potential for additional layoffs of sworn and civilian personnel. And I will be visiting with Council Chair of Public Safety as well as Council President and the Mayor's Office relative to the operational impacts that those potential cuts and further cuts could involve. And I will look to, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, to come before the commission, and provide a similar information as to those operational impacts should these projected cuts be invoked. However, I'll close by saying, as I made a remark yesterday, now that we have done a top to bottom assessment of our operation in order to make and achieve these further cuts of 355 sworn members and 273 civilians, I believe that we can maintain our 21 stations in operations. However, we will have other very serious and crippling reductions in services and capabilities should these further cuts be implemented, particularly at a time when we see such a dramatic increase in our violence. And with that concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chief, for providing information on so many areas. And thank you also for the work with respect to ensuring interventionists get testing. That's critically important to addressing this issue. And hopefully they can also be in the push towards the front of the line in terms of the vaccine as well, in order to ensure their safety as they try to help us tamper down the increase in crime. Commissioners, I have a number of questions for the Chief, but I will defer to all of you first to give you a chance. Looks like Commissioner Soboroff has a question, sir. Go ahead.
Chief, I want to ask you a question about January 6th and Capitol Police. The Capitol Police, there are 2,300 Capitol Police officers, many of whom were deployed and put in harm's way in this situation. And I think it's important to distinguish the rank and file Capitol Police officers who performed heroically during January 6th from we don't know. But whatever leadership, whether it was within the Capitol Police or whatever communications breakdown there was, who made decisions that in fact put these good officers in harm's way. But it seems to be this general buzz that, oh, the Capitol Police really didn't perform well, didn't do this, didn't do that. And I just want to ask you, you can tell me right here, right in public if I'm wrong, but I think there's a great distinguishment between those who put those officers in harm's way and those officers who performed 99% heroically. And I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, I agree with you. And I think also we don't know enough. What I was disappointed with that day was the immediate indictment of the Capitol Police. We have, every day I look at news reports, the more I learn about just how close as a country we came to that insurgency, actually breaking into the sanctity of our capital and jeopardizing the democracy. And I think that is such a startling recognition that it's natural for people to say, where were the Capitol Police and how did this system fail? And we should ask those questions. But I also know that more than 50 of those officers were hospitalized and that there were people an officer who died in that process of being struck by a fire extinguisher. And I'm confident that there was valiantry. I just learned yesterday of an officer who led and tempted and enticed a group of protesters away from a locked door into the Senate chambers and allowing people inside the Senate chambers to lock and secure that door. That was a fact not known to me just a few days ago. And so I think it's really critical that as we look at this, that we, as Americans, we do it on a number of different spectrums, including criticism as appropriate of law enforcement and what our role and responsibilities, which is to include the safety of the sanctity of that process and of that location. I'm also thankful that there wasn't a greater loss of life, that in the efforts to repel that, we did not see the loss of life of rioters that as they move forward. So there's a lot of different complexions. Who knew what was the intel cycle? What was the planning cycle? Did leadership turn down and ignore warning signs? Those are, I think, are fair questions. What I would ask is that that we do this best is that we move forward in a methodical kind of a situation as this commission has done with the events of our past summer. And what were the strengths and what were the failures and areas of improvement that the organization, whether it be leadership or execution of our mission, how do we perform? And I know that some people already have their scorecard out, but I think that it will benefit the department's performance will undoubtedly benefit by a detailed and articulate view, and also the second investigation that's being done and overseen by the City Council into the same activities. I look forward to the same thing occurring, and I believe it will happen. I heard former police chief and former police commissioner Bill Bratton this morning ask for a 9/11 style review of that event to understand that this is in the Capitol the safest and should be the most secure place of our democracy. And how is it that this ravenous group of rioters were able to breach and enter that ground?
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Soboroff, any other questions, sir? No? Commissioner Briggs, please.
Chief, I want to pick up on that theme for a moment. With respect to the wide reports that it is anticipated that not only will there be armed protests next week in the nation's capital, but also capitals of the states throughout our country, assuming that the protesters are listening to all of these reports and understand that those capitals are going to be fairly protected, are there any contingency plans should it arise here in our city, even though it's not widely known yet, or maybe law enforcement and intelligence hasn't yet determined whether or not something like that might happen? Do we have any contingency plans to protect our city?
Absolutely. On just the normal day-to-day operations of of our city government. There are security and police services stationed, as well as physical control points for the city council and for this body in more typical times when we're actually meeting at these physical locations. And for the events of this next week, we have activated our Intelligence Command Center, which is a gathering of tips and leads from throughout this region in concert with our other state and federal partners to evaluate information about potential protests and activities. That information stream is coming out twice a day to me. I review it, as well as members of our senior staff. Additionally, I've already implemented a plan of not just increased vigilance, but through the January 20th inauguration, we'll have the organization in uniform, the entire organization in uniform beginning on Monday. We'll have added staffing patrolled by the hundreds of officers, both on days into the late evening, early morning hours. And we'll have command and staff officers overseeing our Department Operations Center, our Emergency Operations Center. The whole of us of public safety is leaning into this. We recognize as the second largest city in the country that someone might say, well, there's a plan B, and let us come to that. Lastly, I will be participating with our federal partners in a closed session with the City Council on Tuesday and giving our city elected leaders a briefing relative to domestic terrorism, as to extremist groups across the entire spectrum, the risks, the presence that they have in this region. Our investigations, this will not be a classified setting, but it will be a confidential one. And lastly, that is a briefing that Mayor Garcetti has, that we also work with him in his office, that he has had on an ongoing basis since the beginning of this pandemic, and the instances that we saw over the summer with calls for social and police reform, but also the civil unrest and damage and looting and arsons that we saw from there.
Thank you. Commissioner Briggs, does that conclude your question for today? Thank you, sir. Commissioner Bonner, any questions?
Thank you very much. Just one, Chief. I'm going back to the COVID report. And the question, you mentioned the information regarding the number of personnel who may have concerns and may not be inclined to get vaccinated. What is the, and I presume, and this is part of what I'm asking you to comment on, is that you can't require people to get vaccinated, but what are or will the rules be relative to disclosure as to whether one has in fact been vaccinated? So you have, for example, in patrol units, 2 officers, working closely in close proximity throughout the day. Or will they be required to disclose whether or not they've been vaccinated? I mean, what are the rules around protecting privacy and health privacy concerns versus the public health and safety?
So a couple points. You're right. This is HIPAA does limit the amount of information that on personal medical information as far as disclosure. Just a couple observations. First of all, because it is an emergency approval of the vaccine, the ability to require it is limited by law. Once that we transition from that, from an occupational health and safety standpoint, then we get into a new arena of being able to mandate this. Our desire, of course, is for everyone to take this on a voluntary basis. And we have a real information gap that we're working to fill. I put a chief's message out last week. I also visited a couple roll calls in a safe and COVID compliant manner to encourage people. I'll be the first up if that will encourage people. What I want to avoid is getting in front of officers that are working the field in very dangerous circumstances today. But we're going to model the way. We're going to provide as much information about the safety and efficacy of this. And then we also recognize that just because we have the vaccine, that will not release us from the requirements on face coverings and continue to exercise good hygiene. So the fact that 2 people are working together and wearing a face covering, whether they're vaccinated or not, the state of the science today is that they still have the potential of being a carrier and being a risk of a vector of infection for others around them. So even though we'll see this until guided by CDC guidelines, until we reach a point of immunization as a society, that face coverings will no longer be a requirement. So people who take a vaccine will still be required to wear face coverings, to exercise social distancing, continue the same restrictions as previous to that. So I think that we'll answer eventually this question about whether we have a vaccine record that we'd have to show someone. At this point, I don't anticipate we will, because the safeguards will be the same whether the person is vaccinated or not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Chief, I took from your presentation, given the upcoming meetings with council on budget, my questions related to budget and the uptick in crime, I took it from your presentation that you're suggesting it might be more efficient to have a more detailed conversation in the future as opposed to today. And I know all commissioners have questions regarding this, as do members of the public, but obviously we want to have that presentation at a point where there's significant information to provide to have that conversation. Am I correct that you're suggesting doing that after some future?
Yes, I would, only because the depth of this cuts, when we look at the potentiality of the 355 plus 274, 700 fewer officers in addition to the earlier cuts, I've got a number of major structural issues that has potential impacts. And I really don't believe I can do it justice. And I think the criticality of this, that it would be better off for us to come back and give you a structural description of these potential impacts.
Thank you very much, Chief. And I bring that up. I suspected that as much based on your presentation, but I just wanted to clarify that because I don't, obviously this is a very important issue that we all want to be well informed of. And I know we all have a lot of questions on, and I didn't want to ignore that. But knowing that it's coming forward in the near future, we'll just be sure to schedule that. And Mr. Tiefenk, if you could work with the Chief in ensuring we have that on a future agenda item. Thank you. With that, Madam Secretary, why don't we turn to the public comment period? Madam Secretary.
Okay, the first speaker is caller ending in 3146, followed by Defend the LAPD.
Hello, is this me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Hi, good morning. The Chief's public input and number 5.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Great. Talking about the Capitol Police is off topic. I'd like to point out, though, that on the Chief's report on February 11th and February 4th, 2020, there were a week of no categorical uses of force, which I thought was important to highlight. I'd like to talk about the Dorothy Colin. If you look at the video, when the officer is going behind Dorothy and trying to grab her hand, she's also trying to put the flashlight back on her police belt. When she finally pulls the knife and she's got her gun out, she's also still holding on to the flashlight. That didn't help out anything. So let's see. Of course, we need to define a reasonable officer, as the Chief talks about. We still didn't have a use of the gun. That's good this week. But we need to define reasonable officer. Having it undefined means that the human being can't do that, which would be wrong. The human being can define reasonable officer, and it should. And on the training, the words are destroying the rapport between police and specific community. It's compromising the careers of officers. It's not rebuilding the trust, the transparency, or the reconciliation. So, there are some issues there. I'd like to recognize Rodney King. If we wait 5 seconds for Rodney, remember when the officers pulled him over, the 2 in the back got handcuffed nicely and were put in the police car. Rodney, when he was on the ground, they began to hit him for no reason. Of course, everybody knows the rest of the story. And I thought I would do this for all of us. How about this one? I like that.
Do you have anything to say that before the commission?
freedom of speech, Ms.
It has to be a matter for the commission.
Do you remember these days?
To say, we'll move on to the next speaker. Madam Secretary, let's move on to the next speaker. Madam Secretary, next speaker, please.
Okay, next we have defend the LAPD, followed by Becky G.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
All items, please, and general comment.
Okay.
I'm reading this from the LAPD's website, the page about the police commissioners. It says, the commissioners' concerns are reflective of the community at large, and their priorities include implementing recommended reforms, improving service to the public by the department, reducing crime and the fear of crime, and initiating, implementing, and supporting community policing programs. Every single meeting, I hear an awful lot about different reform measures that are being implemented, but I don't hear anything about what the police commissioners are doing to reduce crime and the fear of crime. I know that PPL has had a recent campaign on their social media asking the commissioners, you know, crime is up. What's your plan? What's your plan? What is your plan, commissioners? It's really time that you guys start putting together some kind of plan or letting it be known to the public if you're working on something behind the scenes that we're unaware of, because crime is through the roof. And it's not only in the South End now, it's in the Valley. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's only going to get worse. It's very concerning. I'd also like to say that I support the use of facial recognition technology and any tools that will help LAPD officers investigate and reduce crime. And I support LAPD and defend the LAPD, not defund. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Becky G, followed by Eleni Johnson.
Hello?
Hi, you're on. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report and public comment.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Good morning. Happy New Year, Chief and Commissioners. Do you commissioners have any New Year's resolutions? If not, I have a suggestion. Make a concrete plan to reduce crime. Why is there still no plan to reduce crime, commissioners? I concur with that last caller about the description and role of the police commissioners. It's to reduce crime and the fear of crime and initiate, implement, and support community policing programs. Per your own definition, that is part of your job description. Commissioners, you cannot pick and choose what part of the job you want to perform. Where is the plan? Why do you continue to vote on policies that emboldens criminals? Just like you have expectations of the chief and officers, we the public have expectations from you. Commissioners, since your role is to serve the citizen's voice, perhaps you need to stop giving all your attention to the starving actors calling in every week, practicing their material on you since they have no live audience, since the Comedy Store remains closed due to COVID. You know their end goal is to use comment time to create emotionally charged videos in order to garner likes on social media. Stop letting yourselves get used by them and focus on effectively performing all the roles of your job. There are many citizens of the city who are unable to participate in these meetings, but you commissioners think maybe you need to start engaging with victims of crime to get a true sense of what's going on in the community. I have another solution or resolution for you. Start paying attention to the citizens' pleas to address the violence and crime. Again, everything's up, 36% on homicide, shots fired, everything. It's ridiculous. And already for 2021, double the homicides from 2020. Where is the plan? And I don't mean the commission setting up a meaningless and regressive mask enforcement task force plan. I mean, where is the plan to address violent crime and continued increases in crime? Stop preventing the chief from effectively managing sworn personnel because you are all more concerned in serving your own personal interests and biases.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Eleni Johnson, followed by Adam he, him.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report and all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So I'd like to start with item 4A. The facial recognition platform that LAPD seeks authorization to keep using has been shown to be grossly inaccurate and responsible for wrongful prosecutions. In fact, the same technology is used in the Detroit Police Department and has proven to incorrectly prosecute 2 Black men. San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, Alameda, New Orleans, Boston, Portland, and Jackson, Mississippi have all banned police use of facial recognition technology because of its inaccuracy. LAPD has been using facial recognition technology for 16 years, primarily in Black, brown, and poor communities. We've seen the impact and the outcomes of this highly inaccurate technology where we've never seen the impacted outcomes. It's never been revealed. It's notoriously inaccurate and biased. If I haven't already made that clear, that is my point that I'm making today. And yet it is used by LAPD to initiate leads, add people to databases, track people through communities, and map social networks. So absolutely, we need to say no to LAPD surveillance. If you truly care at all about the communities that you serve, you would oppose the use of facial recognition technology. LAPD has a long and violent history of lies, violence, and breaking laws. In fact, this is classic LAPD tactic where they use a technology, they work within a certain policy and they realize they've actually never created the policy in writing, and so they come back later. So we know that they have been using this technology, and the police cannot be trusted regardless of whether or not a policy is initiated or not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Adam he, him, followed by Jason R.
Hi, good morning. Happy New Year, Becky.
Hi. What items would you like to speak on?
4A, the chief's report and public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
And to be clear, this is Adam Smith. I'm not trying to be anonymous and lie about who I am, like a lot of callers that call in to talk about the Comedy Store. So yeah, regarding 4A, I just find it really convenient that after, a decade or more, 16 years was it, that the LAPD has been using facial recognition technology and just straight up lying about it. Like from, Chief Moore has lied about it. His command staff has lied about it. Steve Soberoff, I'm pretty sure, has lied about it. Josh Rubenstein, who is the PR person for the department, former weatherman, has lied about it. And yeah, like the last caller said, I mean, this actually, the technology that the LAPD wants to continue their use of and what they're asking you today to legitimize is just, I mean, it's been proven how fucking terrible it is. And it's just wild that it's gotten to this point. Stop LAPD spying and BLM, LA, and LA Can, and White People for Black Lives sent you all an open letter and published an open letter with 60 plus organizations around LA that want you to not pass this policy. And not just not pass the policy, but ban the use of facial recognition. If they can use it for 10 years, but lie and say, well, we don't have it, we use the sheriff's technology. Like, we did an outright ban in LA City, and yeah. Chief, yeah, I mean, man, I really wanted to write a follow-up song. I'm just still wondering where those 11 stolen guns are. Your police commissioners won't ask you about it, and you haven't talked about it since. Yeah, there was a story in October in the LA Times that talked about those guns that were still missing, that were stolen and trafficked by your officers. And yeah, they still haven't been mentioned here by any commissioners. I guess it's not that big of a deal. I know you touched upon the instances of violence that happened around the country on January 6th, including in downtown LA. You didn't talk about your Hollenbeck captain, Rick Stabile, and his presence and lack of willingness to do anything, even.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Jason R, followed by Bita Amani.
Hello.
Hi, you're on. What items would you like to speak on?
Police report item 4A and public comment.
Okay.
All right, let's start with Chief Moore's report. You called these white supremacist terrorists that attacked the Capitol ravenous rioters, protesters, Trump supporters. Call them for what they are, domestic fucking terrorists. All right, so we know where you really stand, Chief Moore. In regards to the hate crime that happened last Wednesday outside of LAPD HQ, I will not withhold judgment, as it is clear that LAPD stood aside, watched, and allowed white supremacists to attack Black people and independent media. Chief Moore, in fact, the Black woman who was a victim of a hate crime clearly pointed out to your officers, Detective Kim, badge number 32464, and Captain Stabile, who told her that they could get a citizen's arrest warrant so that she could do a citizen's arrest. The victim could arrest the people that enacted a hate crime on her, and after that they would detain them. This is even after she showed them video of the hate crime and multiple witnesses supported her account of what happened. That's fucking bullshit. Chief Moore, you said your department launched into an investigation into this, even though you could have arrested those people that day. You said that there have been people who criticized that this department did not act aggressively enough that day in regards to this matter. Prove us wrong. I witnessed with my own eyes, y'all create a formation line and move in on a nonviolent protest to cite someone for a bullhorn on day 13 of the Block Our City protest, but you failed to keep that same energy when it came to arresting the perpetrators of this hate crime, a crowd that your officers would label police friendly. You know, the crowd with Nazis, Trump supporters, off-duty police, and Blue Lives Matter flags. So this is yet another example that the LAPD doesn't give a fuck about Black people. To the Black men on this committee, what will you do to protect this Black woman? All right, so now on to item 4. We demand an immediate ban on LAPD's use of facial recognition technology and a complete and thorough investigation into its use. Police surveillance and technology do not increase community safety and well-being. We need a divestment from these technologies, not a legitimization and continuation of their use. What we know as facts is that the facial recognition technology is notoriously inaccurate and biased. So of course, the LAPD uses it to initiate leads, add people to its databases, and track people through communities. The technology comes from DataWorks Plus, a white supremacist organization with algorithms programmed by white men aimed at providing law enforcement another tool to villainize, criminalize, and prey on Black communities. Even the police chief, James Craig from Detroit, said last June, if we were to use this technology by itself to identify someone, which he noted would be against his department policy, he would say that 96% of the time it would misidentify. We know that this technology misidentifies Black people, brown people, Asian people, even women. So we know this policy will not stop the LAPD from its abuse of weapons, tools, and technology. We don't need a policy for LAPD's use of facial recognition tech. We need an outright ban. And in regards to my brother Adam, who said 60 different organizations that keep our needed communities in mind have signed on to this open letter demanding the immediate end to this facial technician. So please listen to them.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Bita Amani, followed by MS.
Hello, good morning, everyone. As a social epidemiologist who studies the impact that criminalization has on health, I am here representing the UCLA CDU COVID-19 Task Force on Racism and Equity. Regarding item 4A on today's agenda, LAPD's use of photo comparison technology or facial recognition technology, we demand an immediate ban on LAPD's use of this facial recognition technology and an investigation into its use. Police surveillance and technology cause individual and community level harm, and as such are a public health problem. They do not increase community safety and well-being and entrench structural racism. Evidence on the effectiveness of these technologies indicates many inaccuracies, with the impact of these inaccuracies disproportionately impacting Black, brown, working class, and poor communities. We need an immediate divestment from these technologies, not a legitimization and continuation of their use. What we need instead are immediate investments into the social determinants of health that do promote community well-being. We are in a public health disaster right now. Investments in care can change the trajectory of this pandemic. As you are aware, in the past several weeks, the Police Commission has received 943 emails regarding LAPD use of facial recognition technology, with 98.7% rejecting the policy. Of 931 emails opposed, 95% demanded a complete ban. Further, over 60 organizations have signed onto an open letter demanding the immediate end to LAPD's use of facial recognition technology and supporting an independent investigation into how it has been used and who has been harmed. These organizations have committed themselves to seeing justice and equity here in Los Angeles County. There are so many existing barriers that need to be removed in order for our communities to get the care they deserve and need in order to thrive. The just action today is to ban and investigate. This is a necessary equitable step towards rectification. I say no to the use of facial recognition technology by LAPD. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have MS followed by Betty Lay.
Good morning. This would be for the general public comment and 4A, please.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Mohammed Tajsar. I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU of Southern California, and I'm providing comment to join the call of the many other dozens of organizations and residents and civic leaders and community members to oppose the adoption of the draft face recognition policy. And so I set forth in that open letter that a number of my previous public commenters talked about. Face recognition is really a uniquely dangerous and invasive surveillance technology that has no place in the arsenal of any law enforcement agency. And even if advances in the technology resolve the serious racial and gender-based bias that have dogged it for years, we believe that its invasiveness will inevitably violate the civil and human rights of Angelenos, and particularly those people of color and working class communities in LA that are historically over-policed. I wanted to raise 3 additional separate points as well too, because I think they're really important. First, the LAPD really can't present any empirically sound evidence that demonstrates that face recognition technology enhances public safety. That's because there is none. So there's no real scientific or rigorous analysis that exists either within the department or elsewhere that demonstrates that this technology reduces crime. So without that, the commission really ought not to sanction its deployment. Second, the policy itself contains a number of really serious failings, which all of which independently counsel against its adoption. The policy makes it so that face recognition will be decentralized and used across the department rather than creating a centralized unit. This will exacerbate abuse of the technology and make compliance with the law and policy more difficult. And there's also other additional limitations that don't exist. And then finally, this system really requires competent and trustworthy oversight mechanisms and a cultural commitment to accountability. And really, we can discern no such oversight mechanisms in the policy and no such commitment to accountability in the LAPD's use of the technology, particularly because it has secretly used it for so long. So on behalf of the ACLU of Southern California, we urge the commission to reject today's policy and to ban face recognition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Betty Lay, followed by Patrick P.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items did you like to speak on?
Chief's report, public comment, and 4A.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. First off, I want everyone to know that I'm supporting LAPD. I'm supporting Chief Moore, and people need to understand the police chief does not have authority or final decision on things. It comes from the mayor's office. It comes from City Council Public Safety Committee. Currently, LAPD cannot afford any more cuts. They need to use all the tools they have available. There are thousands and thousands of citizens that support the racial recognition tools. We need to understand crime is up because of lack of staff and lack of defunding from the budget. This can't go on with everything that our state is going through with the pandemic. People need to stay home, not do the crimes, not do the protests. This is just extremely important that people understand. I hope my words can be comprehended. I appreciate LAPD. I support LAPD. Defend, not defund. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Patrick P., followed by Michelle Manier-Fau. Patrick P., you're on. Okay, we'll come back to Patrick P.
Hello.
Oh, hi, there you are. What items would you like to speak on? Oh, what happened?
Hello, I'm sorry, are you there?
Hi,
I'd like
yes.
to speak on 4A and general comment, please.
Okay, 2 minutes.
I just want to mention that crime is going up, you know, and arrests are down. And this commission is looking to take away facial recognition. Our police can't afford to lose any more tools. We're losing funds, we're losing tools. Crime's going up. I don't see even why this is a discussion right now, what, to appease the minority of people that believe you're wrong. And I want to go back to what other callers have said. What's the plan? What's the plan to reduce this crime? You know, this commission is going, you know, the wrong way with a lot of things. We have commissioners Calanche, who have Legacy LA. Isn't that a conflict of interest to have a nonprofit while you're trying to reform police so money can go into your pocket? It's funny, every time money is mentioned, Calanche's face goes, ooh, money. That's all she cares about. This commission needs to go down. Calanche needs to go. You know, but what about the victims? What about us suffering in our neighborhoods? You guys got to think about that. Our crime is up, our shootings are up, and the communities that I live around, the people that I talk to, are not happy with what's going on. They support our police. And these people are black, they're brown, they're every color you could imagine, and they support our police. We don't have no racist problem. We have a criminal problem. I yield my time. Defend the LAPD.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Michelle Manier-Fau, followed by Irene Moorhead.
Hi, thank you. I would like to speak on the chief report for A and public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. So I would say, you know, the LAPD has been using facial recognition for the last 16 years. Crime should be down, I would think. So it seems to me that it's not something that works, and it could be a fear tactic. I don't know. As a white person, I have not been targeted from the police. I don't feel like I'm going to get killed if I get pulled over. So I can't speak to that, but I can listen and see what I see. When, you know, I have done like a march or something like that, and it's just a bunch of white people, there is very little police, and it seems fine. If I do a march with Black Lives Matter or something like that, there's like 400 police for every like 10 people in riot gear with tasers and tear gas. It's alarming. So I don't see, I understand this, you know, it sounds like some people are afraid. And I get that, you know, and I think that the police are, you can't just say like, oh, they're all bad and they're all terrible, because that's not true, but there are some bad actors. And we have to look at that. And having facial recognition, it does target brown and black communities. And I'd rather see us use like real community services, like investing into the community rather than over policing it. Like Black and brown people already don't trust the police, and I get that. I mean, I think that they have a valid argument there. So why don't we fund our communities with services that will actually help the community thrive and grow and get people out of poverty, like get them, have them have opportunity, like to have invest in public schooling, in apprenticeship programs, in, social services, things that people are actually skilled in. And that way police can focus on real crime, like shootings and things like that. I think that would be a lot more beneficial. In the past several weeks, I know that the Police Commission has received almost 1,000 emails regarding this facial recognition, with almost 99% rejecting that policy. And of like 931 emails opposed, 889 demanded a complete ban, and only 12 emails supported. So I think that we should ban facial recognition and invest in our communities properly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Irene Moorhen, followed by Matios, he, him.
All right. Good morning, Chief Moore. It's great to see your lying face. All right. I'd like to speak on Chief's report, item A, general public comment. So Chief Moore says violent offenders that are preying upon vulnerable communities in Los Angeles should be removed. And I could not agree more. The LAPD commandeers over 50% of the city's budget. Its ranks are overflowing with murderers, domestic abusers, gang members, white supremacists, and supporters of the insurrection attempt in Washington. So let's remove them, okay? Okay, there's no safe space for people who support the insurrection. That's what you said, Moore. Well, it seems like the LAPD is a really safe space. LAPD officer Veronica Salcedo's Twitter account has mysteriously disappeared. She's a Q-friendly conspiracy theorist whose Twitter presence reveals her belief that the election was stolen. She expresses solidarity with the domestic terrorist who stormed the Capitol and murdered a cop. She fangirls over anti-Muslim extremist Scott Pressler, and the same goes for Giselle Espinoza of Community Safety Partnership. So why don't you start there? I gave you a hot tip. Okay, on January 6th in downtown LA, Berlinda Nimbo was surrounded and assaulted by violent racists, domestic terrorists who were supporting the insurrection attempt, and they were just totally let to do that. There was a line of LAPD there. You've heard the previous caller talking about that. They stood by and watched. The LAPD cannot investigate itself in this case. That's clear. We need the FBI. We need somebody who's not totally in their back pocket, and that's certainly not this commission. This commission is a pathetic joke. So Chief Moore speaks about the tragedy of COVID in the ranks of the LAPD. So tell me this, Chief Moore, if you gave me a loaded gun and told me not to shoot myself in the face and I did it anyway, would that be a tragedy, or would I be a stupid fucking idiot? Okay, there's no reason why the LAPD is the super spreader. Why on earth are you even prioritized for vaccines? You guys fucking suck. You didn't do shit about the super spreader events over the holidays, and look what's happened. Your people are dying. Well, they're dying because they don't do protocol, and you can't figure out how to enforce it. Item 4A, LAPD's use of photo comparison technology or facial recognition technology, we demand an immediate ban on that. People have said enough. We don't need a tool that doesn't work, and we don't put a tool that produces racially biased results into the hands of racist law enforcement officials. Finally, change the date and time of this meeting, because City Council is supposed to be looking after you. But guess what? They're in a meeting right now too. Bonner and Briggs, if you are Black, you must stand the fuck up. It is time. Your bullshit questions don't do anything. You play along, you give more talking points. You're an embarrassment. My God, I'm Blacker than you, and I'm a white middle-aged woman. When are you going to stand up for your people? My God. I yield my time. Fuck all of you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Matios, he, him, followed by Madam Secretary.
Hello?
Hi, you're on. What items would you like to speak on?
Hi, Chiefs and all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Hi, on item 4A, the LAPD's use of photo comparison technology, which is really just facial recognition technology. Absolutely not. Why would you legitimize the usage of technology with a well-known racial bias problem. There's been study after study, report after report that has shown that facial recognition technology, what your LAPD supporting caller Betty Lee very accurately called racial recognition technology, is deeply dangerous. Cities like San Francisco, Oakland, Boston, New Orleans, and Berkeley have all banned police use of facial recognition technology. IBM has even abandoned researching it because of its threat to human rights. Even the overtly evil Amazon has put a 1-year pause on police usage of its facial recognition technology because it's racist. So the mind boggles at why this commission that oversees what's arguably the most racist police force in this country would think it's a good idea to make this tech, which again is widely accepted as at the very least problematic, part of the department's policy. One could only assume that it is to legitimize the usage of this technology today and in the past. We demand an immediate ban on facial recognition technology and an independent investigation into its usage by LAPD. You've received 931 emails rejecting this policy. 60 organizations have signed an open letter demanding you ban it. Your own survey and community feedback showed that 99% of people oppose facial recognition tech. The will of the people is clear. Get rid of this piece of racist technology. And stop limiting public comment to 45 minutes. It's an obvious attempt to suppress the people of Los Angeles. And I also don't understand the reasoning behind hearing public comment ahead of hearing the agenda items. It just seems counterintuitive. On to Chief Moore. Just a note about your earlier remark regarding community hesitancy around the vaccine. It's not due to their lack of education. It's due to a long history of racism in this country. It's clear you need the education on the matter. Look up the Tuskegee experiments and maybe you might learn something. Regarding what you said about the attempted coup in DC, by your own admission, law enforcement has openly been a part of this attempted coup, whether it be in their participation in an off-duty capacity or their complicit in action in the presence of these white supremacists. The strong contrast in police response to these two groups is informative, to say the least. Just look at how peaceful protesters were brutalized for having brunch outside of Garcetti's house, but Proud Boys attacking multiple Black people in downtown LA is determined to be lawful. The only conclusion one can draw from law enforcement's affiliation with the swastika-adorned, Confederate flag-wielding, America First movement is that there are white supremacist extremists in your rank. How else do you explain Captain Rick Stabile's refusal to arrest these white supremacist attackers the other day? It came as no surprise to find out that he follows and actively interacts with right-wing extremists on Twitter. This isn't a secret. This isn't news. LAPD's racist. Black Lives Matter. Yield.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Madam Secretary, followed by caller ending in 4952.
Morning.
Morning. What items would you like to speak on?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chief. Good morning, Commissioners. First, well, many of my issues I want to discuss that the Chief already mentioned in his report today. Well, that's perfect. So my comments regarding such issues are regarding the Capitol Hill's police violent event, and then regarding the Los Angeles City Hall violent event happened just a couple of days ago. Like I mentioned last year during the summer, and then that's exactly what I expected, because what I know for sure, for one thing, when police back down, the rioters get up. So right now, people are saying, many lawmakers or public are saying, hey, you cannot use baton, you cannot use tear gas, you cannot do this, you cannot use facial recognition. So, okay, so and then the police and then the law enforcement continue, okay, we don't do that, okay, we don't do that, okay, we ask for consent, oh, okay, we back up. That's how it works. So what I know for one common sense is that law enforcement, they should always on the top of those criminals, on the top of the rioters. But for some reason right now, I have seen that the police power is decreased, and then the rioters' power are increased. And then the result we see, that's loud and clear. 300 plus homicide last year. There are more and more violence in the cities. Crime continues goes up, and then police continue to lose their power. Police continue to lose their money. Police continue to lose their tools. And if we continue this, and I can tell you right now, I can tell everyone right now, next year there will be 400. The year after there will be 500. For some reason that the crime is out of control, and then the police is losing money, losing power, losing personnel, losing officers. I do not understand why it is necessary we are having a conversation right here. I thought that is a non-brainer. And then lastly, I want to report Chief Moore regarding the super spreader event, which is the Metro. I called the sheriff, the highway patrol, I called the Department of Public Health. No one can regulate the Metro bus, which is no mask policy. Metro can only require you, but they cannot enforce it. So, but the truth of the fact is that every time when I'm on the Metro bus, because I don't have a car, there are at least one person on average. Every single bus I take, there's no mask. At the same time, no agency, no law enforcement is doing anything about that. There's no surprise. Every single Metro bus is a super spreader. Please do something. It's a public safety issues. Please more. Please, commissioners, they are super spreader. Enforce the mask, please.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending in 4952, followed by Hamid Khan. Caller 4952.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Hi, I'm going to speak on 4A, the Chief's report, and also on general public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, so my name is T. Guerra. I'm with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. I'm also a member of LAPC Fails Coalition. This is a coalition between LA Can, Black Lives Matter LA, Stop LAPD Spying, and White People for Black Lives. And for folks on this commission or in this space who may not be familiar with these organizations, I just want to name that organizers and community members from the groups I've just named have been coming to these meetings for many years, week after week. Folks are very familiar with being policed and with being surveilled and with police violence and fighting against police violence with community members. And I say that because when people speak out here against police or against police technology or programs in this forum and to this board specifically, or send in comments or petitions or emails, it often gets like downplayed. It gets rejected, treated as not consequential, or somehow part of like posturing or part of a game that we're playing, when actually we all know that this is very real. This is not part of a game. This is not posturing. And when we look historically at how LAPD abuse gets revealed and gets exposed in this forum and in the public, it often comes from the public, right? It doesn't come from this board. It doesn't come from Chief Moore sounding the alarm. It doesn't come from the OIG unless there's intense community pressure involved. So we see all that, yet we see how this space and this process, even that has been going on for facial recognition technology, this 2-week process of getting community feedback, how it has all been done in a way that does not center community voices. Have you spoken to communities where facial recognition was launched and experimented and tested in LA? What do folks there think of this policy? How has it impacted their lives? How has it disrupted their lives? What does it mean when folks are increasingly stalked and tracked and investigated by police under the guise of police following a lead or police identifying them through this technology? Who is LAPD most running facial scans on? These are things that we don't even know. We know that LAPD stops and gathers information predominantly on Black and brown folks, predominantly on youth specifically, at rates that are vastly higher than their white counterparts. Are kids being checked and ID'd by facial recognition? What is the impact of that? To what end? So you all are voting on a policy today for facial recognition, again, that LAPD has been using for 16 years and has never provided meaningful information on. You're voting on a policy for that when we know that this technology is often wrong, more so on Black and brown faces, as well as on women, non-binary folks, and trans folks. We know it is used mainly on these same groups of folks who are already criminalized and used police excessively. We know it's being used by LAPD, the hands of an organization with a deep history of racial profiling and racist abuse that they have not reckoned with and will never reckon with. And we know that surveillance and tracking does not lead to safer communities. It does not foil crime. It does not increase a community's well-being.
Okay, thank you. Next, we
And
have
Madam
Hamid.
Speaker, the next speaker will be our final speaker today.
Okay, our next and last speaker is Hamid Khan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items did you like to speak on?
It's going to be on 4A public comment and Chief's report.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So the big item today is on facial recognition technology and the use of facial recognition technology, and you've heard not just locally but also regionally and nationally and internationally that how this technology has not only been completely discredited, but is being banned all around the world. I mean, it's just been, and not only that, you know, you have corporations whose biggest interest is bottom line profit, have come out and put a moratorium on the use, and they have even decided that they are not going to use this and provide this technology. Corporations like Microsoft, you have Amazon, and various other folks as well. We have seen repeatedly, more recently in Detroit and in New Jersey, that how Black men have been wrongfully prosecuted as a result of the facial recognition technology. And as the other speaker, you know, said that it was racial recognition, it is racial recognition. You've had U.S. senators like Sherrod Brown who have raised concern that the company in Detroit, Data Works Plus, is assisting in violating the civil liberties of citizens across the nation. So I don't know what more evidence do we need. And if this was not enough, you launched on your own process of reaching out to the community. And what you got was almost a 99% rejection. 931 public comments that came to you out of 943 completely rejected the use of facial recognition technology. And then 889, which is about 94% of the total, took it a step further in signing on to the letter that the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, BLM, Black Lives Matter, Los Angeles Community Action Network, and White People for Black Lives sent you, demanding that not only you should reject any proposal to have a policy to legitimize it, you should do an investigation about the harm that has happened to people, and you should absolutely be the leaders in taking a position in imposing an extremely prohibitive, no exception type ban on the use of facial recognition technology. I mean, the world is speaking of facial recognition technology as it's akin to the use of chemical weapons and nuclear weapons. That's the level of dangerousness that we are dealing with. And here we are, that after lying, this is what the LA Times report exposed, that using it for 10 years, 30,000 times after lying, Josh Rubenstein came back in 2019 and said, no, LAPD doesn't use facial recognition technology. In our own public records request, the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition got a response from the LAPD saying that, no, we don't use facial recognition technology. So in a sense, now the lies are being rewarded. That's what they're asking. But yet at the same time, the whole world has spoken. Angelinos have overwhelmingly rejected the use of facial recognition technology. So just
All right, thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you to all the speakers and to everyone who did write in during our public comment period. One moment, Madam Secretary, I think I'm not sure if there's something wrong with the screen. Okay, well, thank you again to everyone who provided public comment. I assure you, none of the commissioners, certainly not myself, consider this a game. We do read and take seriously all public comment. Thank you very much for that. We will move on to the agenda. The next item on our agenda, by the way, and members of the commission, if you could open your microphones all for this item. This is the election of a vice president. Let me open the floor for nominations for vice president of the commission, please.
Madam Chair, I wanted to offer a nomination, if I might. You know, just observing, first of all, that we're obviously in extraordinary times with a long and growing list of issues facing the commission and the department and the city. And I've learned a great deal in my 2.5 years on the commission, and even learning a lot more as I spend more time on the ground in South Bureau. And one thing that I'm seeing increasingly is the value of fresh perspective and some additional new thinking that can be brought to the mix. And it's for that reason that I would like to nominate Commissioner Briggs for the vice president role. I don't know him tremendously well, although we did attend Georgetown Law School together some years ago and have had some fleeting opportunities to become reacquainted. And I think that he has a lot of energy and enthusiasm that will add great value to the leadership you're bringing and to the work to be done by the commission. So I would like to put that nomination forward.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bonner. Is there a second? Yeah, Commissioner Soboroff.
Yeah, I'm happy to second it. I would like to add a friendly amendment that he doesn't do any more skydiving without express permission of the commission. Just kidding. I second.
And certainly if I could make a third on that, I join in the nomination. Thank you, Commissioners Bonner and Soboroff for that. Commissioner Briggs, I assume you're willing to take on this responsibility and join in the leadership of the commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker and Commissioner Bonner and Commissioner Soboroff. Absolutely, I look forward to working with all of you, with Chief Moore, with the men and women of the LAPD, with the City Council and with the citizens of Los Angeles to make this a safer city for all of us, because I think that that is the #1 goal of all citizens here. And I do have a lot to learn. I do have some ideas, but I appreciate your confidence in me, and I would be willing to serve in that capacity. Thank you.
Very good. I will then call the question and put the matter to a vote. It has been moved and seconded for Commissioner Briggs to serve as the Vice President of the Commission. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes 4-0. Welcome, Commissioner Briggs, as Vice President of the Commission. Thank you, sir. We now will move to the regular agenda items. Commissioners, I imagine item 4A will take some time, and there are some other matters on the agendas, on our agenda, item B through G. May I just ask commissioners, if you have any questions on items B through G, I will hold them over. But if there are no questions, I'd like to call those items for a vote. Any items B through G that commissioners would like to hold for questions?
I'm good on all of them.
Sir? Okay. Hearing no items being called for questions, I'm going to run through B through G for votes so that we can spend our time on item A. And those individuals waiting to speak on those items can return to their normal duties. Let me just go to item 4B then. This is the department's report relative to the request for the approval of selected security companies pursuant to an RFP that had been issued. I will move the matter forward. Is it seconded?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 4-0. Thank you. Item, let me just say C, D, E, and F, excuse me, C, D, and E are relative to requests for payments of rewards. I'll call them each separately. Item 4C, a payment for award. I'll move it forward to approve the department's report, transmit to the mayor and city council. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 4-0. Item 4D is also a reward. I will move it forward to approve the report and transmit to the mayor and city council. I've moved it. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Oh, it's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 It passes 4-0 as well. Item E is relative to the payment for a reward. The recommended action is to approve the report, transmit to the mayor and city council. I moved it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? It passes 4-0. Item F is with respect to non-monetary donations. And the requested board action is to approve the report and accept the donations. I will move it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? That item passes 4-0. And then item G is also a non-monetary donation for vans. I will move the matter forward to approve the report, transmit to mayor and city council. Is there a second on that item?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very well, that item passes 4-0 as well. So let's now turn to item 4A. And Madam Secretary, I would ask you call up the representatives of the department who will be addressing questions on this item. Colleagues, we originally heard the matter on December 8th, where a presentation was given on the use of this photo comparison technology. Since that time, we had the matter open for public comment, which we have received, and I know we have all reviewed. And let me just ask everybody to put their microphones on mute while we bring up the department spokespersons. I see we have Ms. Rhodes. It looks like we have Deputy Chief Pitcher, or at least that's the login for Deputy Chief Pitcher. If we turn your camera on, sir, so that we can see you as well. Mr. Zine, welcome, sir. I will ask, I think first Ms. Rhodes, but we'll open it also to the department to respond to. You've heard today's public comment. Also, I'm aware that you all have received copies of the public comment that has been written and submitted. We have received a large number of comments regarding the use of the technology, many of which are opposed to the use of it in any form whatsoever. Some also believe that it puts unfair burdens on the department in the exercise of its authority to investigate cases. I will ask you each to start by responding to those items of public comment that you heard and that you're prepared to, and then we'll ask follow-up questions, members of the commission. Ms. Rhodes, will you go first, sir, ma'am?
Sure. So I would just like to review the policy. Many of the critiques were about not having a policy, either banning it completely or not having a policy with adequate protocols, protections, and limits. And the LAPD in this policy has attempted to balance the competing interests and place limits on the use of this technology. And specifically, this policy places 6 important limits on the use of this technology, which addresses at least some of the concerns, not the concern for an outright ban, but the concerns really raised in the different letters that the commission received. And I will just go through them briefly. The first is the policy limits the purpose that this can be used for. Many of the letters and some of the public comment have talked about scans or surveillance networks. This policy limits that, that the technology can only be used for criminal investigations, threats to life, imminent threats to life, and assistance in identifying incapacitated or at-risk individuals. So that's the first limit. The second limit is the role in which the technology can be used. The policy limits that role specifically to be investigative leads. So it requires additional investigation. The technology by itself is nothing but a lead. Moreover, photo comparison technology is a form of artificial intelligence. The policy requires actual human intelligence, not just the computer. So as a result of the above, that it requires actually a human, an officer or analyst to look at these things, and also further investigation, what is articulated in the policy and what should be known from those two things is the photo comparison technology does not and cannot provide probable cause. More is needed to have anything go forward. The third limitation that the policy provides is the platform. What kind of photo comparison technology can be used? And the policy establishes that one and only one platform can be used, and that is the digital mugshot system of the Los Angeles Regional Identification System, otherwise known as the DMS of LACRIS. There are no other platforms that can be used by LAPD officers to effect the purposes that I previously articulated. The fourth is it prohibits, and according to the law that was brought up in many of the letters, AB 1215, digital in-car video, body-worn video, or anything held in the hand of an officer. Also, in addition to the law, the LACRIS system doesn't allow for sketch artists. So those are prohibitions on what can be used. A fifth limit is that the policy requires that anyone using this technology is trained in its use. So we don't have any issues with someone using it without training, and the access is controlled. The commanding officer must indicate why that person should get trained on the use and therefore be able to use technology. And then the sixth and very important limit is that, and maybe it's not quite so much of a limit, but the policy establishes oversight and accountability. This would reveal outcomes and usage so that we could report both to the public and to this commission what the technology is being used for, how it's being used, how much of it is being used, et cetera. And that's an important function. And of course, then it has audit functions and other things within the policy itself. So in that way, it takes into account many of the concerns in the letters that the commission and the LAPD received on both sides. It has accountability and oversight, but not in such a burdensome manner that technology cannot be used to solve crime. And one additional point I would just say in terms of the decentralization, which was brought up by one of the callers. The training is centralized, as well as the accountability measure, the duty to record, that will all be collected in one place. And so those are two ways in which the policy actually centralizes the use of this technology. If there are any additional questions or concerns or things that I did not address, I'd be happy to.
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up on something you said, and I do want to be sure all the commissioners have an opportunity to ask questions. One of the criticisms that's been highlighted is no rigorous analysis, and that the system currently as constituted, but also the policy doesn't afford for rigorous analysis. I was interpreting, but I want to be sure we're on the same page, that the audit process that you're referencing is, or it's intended to present a rigorous analysis system. In other words, the questions of whether it actually does reduce crime, whether people are misidentified, whether there are other failings in the technology that can be highlighted, and whether it is a trustworthy system that is achieving the goals of addressing crime, that the audit system that is being put together is designed to do that. That was my interpretation of it, but I need to be sure that that it's not, that is also the intent of the department, that it's not simply a check the box kind of system that is going to be put into play here. And I should just tell my colleagues as well that should the commission approve this policy, it would be my intent to get the Inspector General engaged in this process as well, in terms of ensuring that the oversight mechanisms are in place to be sure that the system is rigorously being analyzed, and that any flaws in the system are being identified that this commission could address. But Ms. Rhodes, could you please address in more detail the and I'm assuming it's Ms. Rhodes, it could be somebody else from the department. So forgive me if this is actually somebody else's question. The criticism about this system lacking rigorous analysis and whether the audit system you're putting together is designed to address that.
So yes, I do think it's me, and the audit system that is put together and articulated in the policy at the bottom of page 3 and top of page 4 is exactly designed to address that. While we worked to make sure that it wasn't overburdensome and would take too much time, after the hopefully soon computer generated form is filled out, or computer form that individuals can fill out on the computer is available to them and easy to fill out, the analysis has to be done to see what exactly the DMS was used for. Was it a photographic lineup? Was it something else? Where did that go? What types of crime were involved? And while one could not, because as I've mentioned previously, the photo comparison technology will not lead solely anywhere. Whether it or not that technology helped in solving crime will be analyzed through this system.
Very good. Thank you. And colleagues, I'll just ask one more question before turning it over to all of you. Chief, I think because this is such an issue of public trust and there's a lot of skepticism in the public, as you've heard today, but also as you've seen in the written comments, I do think and would ask you, Chief, if you could comment on this and the efforts that you, as chief of the department, will undertake in using this as an opportunity to build public trust around a system that you believe helps fight crime. But I think the Board of Police Commissioners, but also the community, need to hear from you on this as well.
I'm happy to join in on this conversation. I do believe that the document before you, the policies, procedures, the oversight, strike the critical balance of what police work involves, which is protecting victims, identifying those that prey upon others, and using eyewitness testimony, using eyewitness accounts, the ability to identify those responsible through what we see and observe around us. In part, I mean, there's many other avenues in which we can go to solve crime, but one of the most critical aspects of it is when, as a society, we capture an image of an individual that's actively engaged. I'm reminded of a homicide investigation that was about a year and a half ago involving a gentleman who was robbing stores, and in the process of doing so, shot and killed the store owner. And that image was captured on that store's closed circuit television. And then that single image was then brought to this LACRA system, and a host of potential leads were developed. And from that, the detectives, with the human involvement, narrowed it down and eventually identified the individual that was responsible for that vicious crime. In the absence of that information, I worry that offender would still be out and would still be preying upon others. Yet at the same time, we're well aware of the fact that photo recognition, photo comparison is in place all across our society. Our limit is a much narrower group. And also the accountability and oversight is to ensure that people are properly trained, and that then the oversight that's been placed here is not just by Detective Bureau doing a semi-annual audit to check and ensure that the controls are adhered to and reported on, but I also look to the bureau chiefs in the areas that have these, that will use this application, as we have for some time, to show the rigor that we're limiting our efforts, we're documenting the outcomes, and we'll have the ability to study and evaluate the effectiveness and show to the public a validation that this is meaningful work and needed technology and efficient technology as we go to solve crime. Lastly, the role of the Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy will have an independent ability to audit and review this separate and apart from Geographic Operations and Detective Bureau, and then of course the Inspector General's office also. Lastly, this is part of a larger criminal justice system, that this information, that we don't operate in a vacuum. Information gathered through the use of technology, just as an example I've just described, is articulated in investigations and arrest reports and brought before the court. and the judicial system closely scrutinizes its use to ensure that the due process rights of offenders as accused are protected. And I'll close by saying, with that, even then, we recognize that the role of photo comparison and even eyewitness testimony is rigorously challenged in our court system and must oftentimes be corroborated by independent and separate items of evidence and information to demonstrate that this wasn't just an encounter where some person mistakenly identifies another individual as being responsible for a crime when in fact they are not actually responsible. So this is part of that work, and I believe and would ask for this commission's support for the adoption of this technology, its oversight, and I look forward to I would anticipate the third or no later than the fourth quarter of 2021 that we would come back to this body with our first initial report of what these protocols and policies have shown and resulted.
Chief, just a quick follow-up. Some members of the public, although a smaller group, also expressed concerns about it being this policy and presumably the audit measures involved being an undue burden on the department. Can you just comment on that quickly?
No, I believe that this strikes the right balance. There is a paper process now that will memorialize, if you will, the investigator's actions, him or her, how they captured the image, the use of the LACRA system, the outcome of that photo comparison, and we are now working with ITB. Deputy Chief McMahon is formulating a module within our technology that will incorporate it into our detective case tracking system. So this will become a routine where the detective, as they're working on their cases, can to the earlier conversation, click a box, enter in quickly some information that will allow us to go back later and from a centralized position actually audit and track this. Currently, it's a paper-based system. The information we're talking about here is oftentimes, well, it has been captured throughout the years, but it requires us to go out to the individual stations, pull investigative packages, pull the subsequent court records in order to make this analysis that everyone, I believe, is looking forward to. I'll close by saying this technology is very much akin to eyewitness testimony. And there are studies and there are accounts that demonstrate there is a place when properly controlled, properly used, and with corroborating information for eyewitness testimony in solving crime and in holding and bringing to justice those that are responsible, as well as exonerating those that are falsely accused.
Thank you, Chief. Lieutenant Zine, I did not mean to ignore you, sir. I realize asking you to speak after your chief is probably not the ideal situation for you, but if you'd like to add anything to what the Chief of Police has said or Ms. Rhodes to any of the questions we addressed to them, we'd certainly appreciate hearing from you as well. And then commissioners, I assure you, I'm going to turn to you. Lieutenant Zine, you're on mute, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Just to reiterate what the Chief and Director Rhodes said, we reached out to several detectives at area commands, as well as specialized divisions, to find out if this was going to be overly burdensome in regards to the questions. And just to reiterate what the Chief said, this is on track with capturing irrelevant data. We'll be able to process this information and store it correctly. And we don't anticipate any burden on operations whatsoever for this.
Thank you, Lieutenant Zine, appreciate that. And commissioners also, you know, there's always a balance between burden and getting the information we will need to do our oversight. And I will be asking the Inspector General, should we pass this measure, to be actively engaged in that, working with the Executive Committee to ensure that the Commission, should this measure pass, that we get information that's meaningful to us in conducting our oversight. With that, let me ask you to open your microphones or signal to me. Oh, Commissioner Soboroff, I see you have a question, sir. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I think this is of the Chief, and I want to make a comparison, as you brought up, Commissioner Decker, the word trust, a comparison between what happened with, I think we're in the second or third year of the unmanned aerial, the drone situation, and this situation, because I do believe that we have earned trust through that situation. And as I recall, there were many hundreds of emails, just like in this time, and basically talking about the mistakes that other agencies were making in overdoing what their policies were. And the policy that we adopted was very limited and very restrictive. And through the years, it's shown that it has saved lives and hasn't cost any lives or one mistake of infringement on anyone's rights. My question is, in this case, so I think we've earned trust. In this case, a whole bunch of letters, many of them talk about abuses or mistakes that have been made with this type of facial recognition in other places. And my question is, as this policy has been developed, how are we different? How are we doing what we did with the drone program? How are we limited versus what others are doing? Because I think that almost all of the discussions have come with an abuse of what we're going to do, which we've proven that we don't do that. Chief?
Well, I'm going to ask Ms. Rhodes to get into greater detail, but I will suggest, we'll say two things. A, this conforms with recently enacted laws, which prohibits the use of body-worn or cell phone video captures for photo comparison purposes. Secondly, the platforms. There are a number of there are a number of commercially available photo comparison and facial recognition applications, even our social media applications that we have, such as Facebook and so forth, that have tools. This prohibits the use of those as a department. Those are currently not prohibited by law or even, but by a best practice, we believe that we should limit and narrow it to just the use of mugshots. These are individuals that have been arrested and now, while not convicted, that's the body of comparison rather than captures that may occur in a public setting in which we're trying to link unknown individuals to unknown individuals or unknown individuals that we later determine who they are. So this is, and then two other aspects, training. These are personnel that have to go through specific training, have to be, and if they do not have continued use of the system, have to be updated in that training. And then finally, the oversight where we're seeing the outcomes. I believe that this will offer us an opportunity to show the profession that out of the use of this photo comparison technology, as an example, 100 times we produced how many leads that were then further corroborated that by individual and independent evidence that resulted in a criminal filing that then resulted in a criminal trial, prosecution, and outcome. That type of pathway currently is an academic study that requires a paper search. This process is going to allow us to put this in a matrix of a decision tree and outcomes, and with the electronic database that's being developed to actually begin to show a field of work on this and potentially identify things that we are not seeing today, which is always an attribute of policing. Ms. Rhodes, that's just my initial reactions. Anything you'd add?
I would only add, Commissioner Soboroff, that in looking at the news reports and some of the links that were submitted by the letters, including about Detroit, the criticism there was that they had no protocols whatsoever. And in this case, we've established some pretty significant limits and protocols in addition to the accountability and oversight. And so I think both the protocols and the oversight distinguish this policy from other cities' policies.
Thank you.
And I just want to add one last thing. There's a lot there in the policing industry today. There's a belief that that LAPD or policing agencies are actively monitoring closed circuit television camera captures and comparing them against some type of photo recognition database, photo comparison database. That does not exist in this department, and this process that's before you today would prohibit that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Soboroff, anything further, sir?
No, fine, exactly.
Thank you. Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you. Chief Moore, I want to pick up on something that you just said. with regard to CCTV. So just to be clear, the system that is being proposed here is not going to be used to track citizens. Is that correct?
Yes, to be clear on tracking citizens, this is a system that is not an active system, meaning the only time information or photo comparisons are brought to the LACRIS system is when we are conducting a criminal investigation or to mitigate an imminent threat. So it's not an ongoing monitoring where we take a passive system. There are across the world, there are instances of governments that use a passive system that constantly they do a lookup against known individuals that are wanted by the state. This does not do this. This is only used in an instance in which a crime has occurred, or we have information about an imminent threat to life, or we have an individual who's unable to identify themselves, and we have their image, and by lack of mental facilities or otherwise, we're trying to identify them. And we take that image, that live that capture, and then we compare it to a database made up of individuals that have been arrested and booked into the county system. So it is not ongoing, it is case specific, and it's limited to that.
I guess it begs the question, and there's been a lot of comments and criticisms in the 1,000+ letters that we've received, suggesting that there is going to be some sort of mapping or scraping of social media. Is that going to occur?
No, in fact, this policy addresses how that comparison interaction is limited to that comparison. The system, LACRIS, does not take the image that we use as the proof, and I'll ask Ms. Rhodes to give the actual term, the probe. It doesn't take control of that and use it for some later purpose. It is an instance where we bring, as a law enforcement investigation, to the database a question of a comparison set. And the LACRIS there's no value added in the LACRIS system. So we don't add, like the DNA database and other systems that do exist that will keep unidentified numbers. But in this instance, that is not the case. It is just simply an active investigation. We take a look at the system. It comes back with suggested potential leads. And when that case is closed, there's no mapping of the image. There's no recording of a heat map, if you will, of where these images are coming from. Ms. Rhodes, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, and the term is correct. The probe image goes into the system. It compares against this database of mugshots and that database alone. And the probe image does not stay there, so that a second probe would not find that first probe, because the probe never gets into the database.
And I'm glad you answered that, Ms. Director Rhodes, because that was going to be my next question. What do we do with the images that are compared to the mugshots that are already in the database? Do we retain those and build a larger database? Because I think that that's some of the concerns that the citizens have expressed here.
So that image may stay in the case file, but it never goes, that particular image doesn't go into the database. Now, if that person, I guess, if that person is eventually arrested because there are multiple other indicia that she or he committed the crime, then that person's mugshot will eventually be in the database. But the probe photo does not go into the database.
Probe photo would recognize an individual responsible for a crime, say a murder or a shooting. And we could have, and we do have, in fact, crime bulletins that have that image and asking for the public for assistance in identifying. But we do not have a data file of unsolved crimes that are in an image file that are somehow trying to link one to another. There's not that unknown database.
Finally, one of the big elephants in the room, as it were, from all of the comments that we've heard today and the letters that we've received, and it deals with this notion of racial bias. Independent of the information that we've had here, I too have read anecdotal incidents around the country of this artificial software that is called facial recognition software as having a high error rate. And I think our report recognizes that at around 37%, particularly for Black Americans. What are we doing, if anything, with respect to policy-wise to ensure that we don't have that type of error rate, or how are we addressing that particular issue?
So a couple of things I will talk about. The technology that is used maps one's face and with the different, how far away different aspects of your face may be. Then it gives the user a series of photographs. So really it's much more like if you were going to mugshot books and you were able to pull up similar photographs and see, you know, or maybe similar in some ways, and see which person really resembled the person in the photo. We are not saying, while the company that supports LACRIS has, you know, claims to have very high rates of being able to pull like photographs, the policy makes sure that it is a human being that really looks at those potentially similar photographs and says which one is the most like, or which one in a human's eyes matches the photograph that we have, and then additional investigation is needed. So it could turn out that the person that you see or that you pick out in the whole line of photographs that looks most like the one you submitted is not a person that did the crime you're investigating. And then, you know, that's sort of police work. That is detective work. And that is what detectives do every day. This policy and this technology would help them do that more efficiently to either proceed down a fruitful path or actually determine that that wasn't fruitful.
So if I could summarize, the technology doesn't identify a person, let's say person A, and say, this is your suspect, go get them. It gives you options. Look at person A, B, C, and D, and then there's further investigative work with regard to those individuals. Is that correct?
That's correct. It is not like if you have an iPhone that you put the picture in and it gives you a yes or no. It gives you some options. None of those options may be valid. It also may come back and say, for whatever reason, there is not a good match. And that's one of the things that we want to record in the oversight and accountability phase, just how many times matches were produced or potential matches, and how many times no match was found at all. And a match is actually the wrong term, and I'm sorry I've said it now twice, but were potential photos, comparative photos given, or were no potential photos given. And I think that that would be, among other things, a helpful thing to be known. And that's one of the things that the oversight should do.
I would only add that the very mechanical nature of it, and I'll ask Ms. Rhodes for a typical, or Lieutenant Zion for a typical response. The system is designed specifically not to say, here is the one-to-one match. It provides an array of photographs that may potentially be the individual. So its own inherent nature is why to suggest that this is not a, this is your guy or man or woman, that this is a potential. Secondly, why the policy so explicitly requires additional human involvement and engagement is to corroborate and bring evidence and information in as to whether there's additional information that would support
that this comparison leap potential has potential. Ms. Rhodes, on a typical response of an inquiry or Lieutenant Zine, the system will return how many potential photos?
I believe over 200.
Yeah, Chief, it's a preset. I believe it's 267 candidates that would come back.
So I don't mean to suggest that every query will have that type of recognition, but it does not come back with a one-to-one as a matter of design. Secondly, can the Ms. Rhodes and Lieutenant, the database that is going against, these are mug shots of within LA County and of how many thousands?
There's the database total is going to be 8,725,000 approximate photos, and they're all booking photos. So the only photo that the probe image is going to get compared to is a booking photo that's been verified.
Lastly, these are similarities because we also use this system for photo comparison when we do what's called lineups. This is where we have a person that's been identified. Mike Moore has been accused of committing a robbery, and we'll go to this database with Mike Moore's image and then come back with those who look that have comparison. And it could be an array of 20, 30, 40, 50 images that have similarities. And then we put that in a photo array, sequential array, and ask the eyewitness testimony, eyewitness victim, can they identify? So this system cuts both ways. And it's, but I believe that what's before you is a matter that enjoys complete transparency before the court, that is challenged by the defense, and it's presented to the jury for evaluation. And I believe that it protects the due process rights while also recognizing its fallibility of that it's not perfect, that it can and will. In fact, it identifies potential leads by the hundreds that have no involvement. It's impossible for them to, but there was a comparison that suggested it come back.
I'll just make one final comment, if I might, Commissioner Decker, and that is that there was a comment made during the public session by a gentleman from the ACLU that there's been a rigorous comparative analysis that these types of systems, facial recognitions, violate civil rights. It seems to me, based on the discussion that we've just had, and also the proposal that you're making, Commissioner Decker, that we have the Inspector General monitor this and have some oversight, that there are protections in place to prevent this type of wholesale violation of civil rights. Based on the way the system will be used here, I just don't see the fit that was argued by some of the comments from the citizens that this would result in a wholesale violation of civil rights. But so I want to thank everyone for this information. This has been helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs. Have you concluded? Yes. Yes. Commissioner Bonner, questions, sir?
Thank you. Just a couple. First, I wanted to follow up on the questions about the situation where you get the computer-generated list of comparisons, and then you need to match that with human or investigative analyses. And I wanted to, I think this was covered in one of Commissioner Briggs's questions, but does the comparison list have any value whatsoever absent any human or other investigative analysis?
Well, it's not a list, it's actually the photographs, so you can look at them. And the policy prohibits any action from being taken. So I don't see, and just a list of, or just a group of photographs, I can't think of any value that it would have without, an actual investigation taking place and human detective work going on. And
can the detective or the investigator, and I'm using that term because I'm reading, I may be misreading it, but I'm reading the language that says all. PCT searches require department investigators to compare the search results and shall not accept a computer-generated list of comparisons without further human and investigative analyses. That's why I'm referencing that computer-generated list of comparisons. And maybe that's the list of photos, or maybe that's a package of photos. Can the investigator or the detective retain that and then go look for further human or investigative analysis? In other words, can you retain that and then 6 months later during the investigation or something, then use other information you obtained to go back and look at the list of photos that were generated? Or do you need to have some investigative, human and or investigative analysis in hand, so to speak, that can be coupled with whatever comes out of the system? Or can you get the list of comparisons first and then continue the investigation and come back and match it up later?
Well, I guess I think that's it's one of those things that it really depends on the case. So if you have a photo and that's the first thing you have, and you want to put it through the DMS system, and then you do more investigation and maybe you get a different or better photo, you could resubmit. You also may, I guess, see two potential matches that look similar, and you might want to investigate both. So I think, as with most law enforcement, the path taken is dictated by the facts of the particular case that you're investigating.
I think the interest would be in just making sure that, because I, like most things, I assume that the process is not going to be predictable and linear, and as the investigation goes, any given investigation goes on. And I think part of what I'm getting at is you wouldn't want to look back, say, a year from now and find out that you've got a lot of these photographs and comparisons that were generated from the system, and they're in a file somewhere or in a database somewhere or sitting around somewhere, because we think with continuing investigation, we may at some point obtain human and investigative analysis to match up with those and make some value of it. So that's kind of what I'm trying to understand, is whether there is risk of that scenario where over time you just kind of compile these lists and photographs that have been kicked out while you're still continuing investigation. That's what I'm trying to understand. And maybe also a related question, getting to the issue of the oversight, is I didn't see, and this was part of Commissioner Decker's comment, I think, before, about whether I see you've got the quarterly reviews and the commanding officer review and all those, but all those, from I could see, they all go to compliance with the protocols around the system. And I may have misunderstood the question, but I thought that the question went to reviewing the efficacy of the system, whether it's really producing value and helping to solve crimes. And can you clarify for me where that analysis went and where that analysis takes place?
Well, the purpose of recording all of this is not to just amass more unanalyzed information, but to actually look at it and take a look back to see what the system that LAPD had in place did, and whether it was efficient and effective. And so that's the reason for actually the duty to record the results. So I guess, of course, the commission may ask for us, our audit division may ask for it, the IG may look at it, but the purpose of the recording is to actually make sure that we're on the right track. And then if really any adjustments or different, things need to be placed either in policy or practice or training, we have the information to do that. And we're not sort of we're not blind in that regard.
Well, thank you. I would certainly feel better if we're considering a motion that it include something on this issue, mainly, again, and I could be misreading this, but what I'm taking from this is there's a series of steps in here that are designed to ensure compliance with, with the stated requirements. And I do interpret that at least as you're looking to make sure that people who access it have the required training, to make sure they've got the appropriate authorization to access the system, make sure they filled out the forms that said they use the system. But I'm not seeing anything in here. I see the final reference to the audit division that gives them the discretion as to whether to do an audit, an inspection, or review, but it doesn't have anything that, I'm not seeing anything that says, yeah, a year from now, we know that we will get someone, whether it's the audit division or the IG, or someone will look not just at whether all the boxes were checked and everybody followed the rules, but is the system producing value? Anytime you do have these other concerns that look sort of the nature and volume that are being raised, the general skepticism is out there. So you wanted to balance those concerns with a system that works. So that if we find out that it doesn't work, you may say, well, then it's not worth implicating all of those other concerns and risks that are out there. But that's what I'm looking for is what besides the compliance part of it tells us that we're going to do that look will occur.
Mr.
Well,
Bonner,
I understand. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ms. Rhodes. That's my intent, to have the Inspector General ensure that we as a commission receive robust information exactly as you've just articulated.
Thank you. Appreciate that. My final question then is about because the other kind of issue that permeates the discussion is the lack of skepticism and concern in the public as well. So how much of the information that's going to be tracked and prepared here will be subject to disclosure to the public as well?
Well, I believe the IG's reports are subject to disclosure, and anything that comes before the commission is subject to disclosure. So I think it is subject to disclosure, and that's really to build trust. We have to disclose what the findings are.
So,
and I think
over time, there will be some means by which the public will be able to understand the extent of how well or how often the system's been used, and some of the same information or results that we'll have access to.
It's both usage and outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about confidential and information that would not be subject to disclosure otherwise, but in terms of the public's ability to really understand, how the system's being used and how often and so on. I'm assuming that information will be just subject to disclosure under the Public Records Act.
Well, Mr. Bonner, let me also address that if you don't mind, sir. And Ms. Rose, I don't mean to interrupt you. However, it is my intent that if we do pass this measure, and so I want to be sure the chief knows, the Inspector General knows, and the department knows that it is our intent that the whole point here is to be transparent with the public and to advise them, much like I think Commissioner Soboroff made an analogy on the usage of drones, where they're used, how they're used. Similar reporting, we have to work with the department and the Inspector General to get a report that's meaningful. But we must, to build trust, be transparent about this process should this policy proceed. Absolutely. And I assume the department has no problem with that.
No.
Chief?
Fully support. Absolutely. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, Commissioner Decker, you asked the framing of this. I anticipate the first report in the third quarter, no later than fourth quarter 2021, and it would address usage. It would address outcomes. It's meant. I see your point, Commissioner Bonner. I understand your point. The semi-annual responsibilities of the Bureau COs of the Detective Bureau CO. I see operationally Chief Pitcher's group coming up with a semi-annual compliance, and then from that compliance outcomes. And then I see Ms. Rhodes on behalf of the larger department and also the Inspector General doing this. And I think Commissioner Soboroff had it well with what was then a pilot program with regards to UAS, is that building public trust is transparency, and bringing up and taking a conservative view and a narrow view on this
and ensuring that we recognize that there are critics of this, and we want to hit the right measured spot.
I appreciate that. I would ask of the chair that you, in whatever way appropriate, have that reflected in the motion that's brought forward, so that we're all clear that on the commitment that's being made to make sure that there's follow through on the transparency.
Absolutely, Commissioner Bonner. I'm going to do my best here and help me out if I don't quite strike the right balance. Any further questions, sir?
No, thank you.
All right. And before I go to the motions, commissioners' questions? All right. Everyone having concluded, and first I do want to say a deep sense of gratitude to all the members of the community who've participated in this process. We do read what you submit, and we thank you for your time and your commitment to our community. Prior to today, I did look at a number of policies around the country. I looked at the studies on facial recognition, read the reports on racial disparities, and of course, I share the deep concern that many of the members of the community have expressed. And I certainly hope that the department can appreciate why there is suspicion around the use of such technology. It is founded in a number of studies. Yet at the same time, I'm also very cognizant of the fact that the technology, if used with limits and oversight, could be very helpful in the solving of serious crimes that are afflicting our community. And in my review, I've seen no study that matches the restrictions that have been that the LAPD has approved, nor the oversight that I would like to see on this. So before considering a ban, as many members of the public have suggested, I would suggest we proceed with this more measured approach with some conditions, of course. It has to be used appropriately. It has to be used with considerable oversight. And I am asking the Inspector General to work with the Executive Committee of the Commission to develop a strong oversight system with periodic reviews that we can provide to the public and add to the transparency, so the community that has suspicion can look at the data themselves, and hopefully we can use this as an opportunity, and the department can use this as an opportunity to be transparent and address the concerns of the community. But of course, if the data proves to us that this system is not being used for the results that we intend, that we obviously have to revisit this policy. So I do want to just add that I do want the community to know we hear you. We will continue to listen to you on this issue. At the same time, I do also recognize many in our community are suffering from considerable violence. So proceeding with a balanced approach to give law enforcement the tools to address serious crime while providing oversight, that is fundamentally our duty here. So with that, I am going to move forward, members of the commission, with item 4A, to approve the department's December 8th, 2020 report and to receive and file the January 7th, 2021 report, with the modification that the Inspector General is to work with the Executive Committee of the Commission in developing and ensuring that, in addition to the audit procedures reflected in the policy, that there is a strong oversight system that is designed to address many of the concerns that we've articulated here today. Does any member of the commission have any issue with that motion or wish to add any specific language? I think the intent of this commission was clear in our conversation.
I just wanted to clarify that that again, the compliance and the oversight, that again, that's going to include a review of efficacy. You know.
Yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely, sir. Yes, absolutely. So I will move that forward, and unless there's any other modification to it, seeing none.
Second motion.
And it's been seconded by Commissioner Briggs. Thank you, sir. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes 4-0. Thank you very much, commissioners. And unless I'm mistaken, we're now moving to closed session. Mr. T. Fank, I did not miss anything, did I, sir? No.
No, ma'am. We're ready for closed session.
Very well. Madam Secretary?
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda item 5A1 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to closed session. Good afternoon. We're going to be restarting in a moment as soon as we have a quorum of commissioners, and I'll give the other commissioner a chance to, oh, we have all our commissioners online. The chief of police will be joining us as we close out as well. If we can just give him a moment. And may I ask the secretary, I believe the chief is, I'm not sure what you call it, in the weight room or in the gallery. If you could bring the chief of police forward so we can close out today's session with his presence as well.
Thank you.
There we go. There. Thank you. And the reason I did ask for the chief of police to join us is we are going to be closing out today's session in memory of Rose Ochi, a former member, commissioner of the Board of Los Angeles Police Commissioners. We were all very saddened to learn of her passing on December 13th. Rose Ochi was a member, former member of the Los Angeles Police Commissioners. She was appointed to the Board of Police Commissioners by Mayor James Hahn and served from August 15th, 2001 to June 30th, 2005, and played a significant role in the development of policies and procedures and oversight of the department. Her work guiding the department through the turbulent days following 9/11 and the 9/11 attacks and the initial phases of the federal consent decree were absolutely pivotal to the department and to the safety of the city of Los Angeles. She also participated in the selection process, which led Mayor James Hahn to appointing William J. Bratton as the chief of police in October 2000. I do have a few final remarks, but before I do, I will ask the chief of police for his comments at this time. Chief?
Commissioner, thank you for this opportunity and truly an honor. Commissioner Ochi and I met when she was upon her first appointment, and I would characterize, just as you have, her time on the commission was during a profound time in our history. In the aftermath of the Rampart scandal, the selection of Chief Bratton, the consent decree and the entrance of this organization into it, we were in a time in which crime and violence was increasing, the morale of the organization was plummeting, and it was certainly a crisis that required a steady hand and a sure voice. And Commissioner Ochi had both. And she was one also that had a compassion and a heartfelt warmth for the rank and file, for the men and women of this organization, while also challenging them to reform and to evolve into a 21st century policing. After her departure, her time at the California State University of LA, at the crime lab there as the executive director, times in which I worked with her and had the occasion to see her at International Association of Chiefs of Police, Department of Justice, and other criminal justice functions across the country. Her impact was not just here in Los Angeles as a commissioner, but upon the criminal justice system. And then, of course, her background, where as a survivor of the internment camps and the injustices that she saw as an American. She certainly came from a position of authority and reflection as to what America had been and what it could be. And I miss her. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. As the chief indicated, and as my initial comments did, her life story, her commitment to civil rights, and her dedication to public service will remain an inspiration to all of us. She truly left a legacy of service to the city of Los Angeles, to the department, and to the Board of Police Commissioners. And on behalf of the Board of Police Commissioners and the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department, we offer our deep sympathies to Ms. Ochi's family and to her loved ones. And we offer our sincere recognition for a life well lived. May her memory truly be a blessing to all. And now, Mr. Tiefank, may I ask you, sir, to do a closeout of our closed session, please.
The Commission has concluded its business in closed session as relates to item 5A1, officer involved shooting 006-20. The Commission adopted the Chief's recommendations unanimously on a 4-0 vote. Those recommendations were tactics, administrative disapproval, 1 police officer 2, tactical debrief, 1 police officer 2, drawing and exhibiting in policy, 2 police officer 2s, non-lethal use of force in policy, 2 police officer 2, lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer 2. That concludes the report.
Thank you very much. I will move that we adjourn. Is that motion seconded? It's Commissioner Soboroff has seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We will stand adjourned until the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.